Today's episode of the Bill Simmons Podcast is brought to you by SeatGeek. That's our presenting sponsor since 1978. The NBA and NHL seasons are in full swing. SeatGeek is the smartest, easiest way to get tickets to your favorite team's games. Buy and sell tickets in just 2 taps on your phone. Have SeatGeek help you find the best seats at the best prices. Fully guaranteed, and if you're looking for concert tickets, even better. I've had SeatGeek on my phone for 2 years, and it is by far the easiest way I've found to shop for tickets thanks to their revolutionary grading system. Try it out. Download the SeatGeek app today or go right to SeatGeek.com. Just do it. How many times do I have to tell you? We're also brought to you by the Ringer University podcast. That's where you can find Teed Up, our excellent college basketball podcast with Mark Titus and Tate Frazier, who's producing this podcast right now. We are a month away from March Madness. I looked it up. I did the math. Those guys can help you with your bracket. They can help you with your gambling on the conference championships. They can help you with both. Whatever else you need. 2 young dudes who watch an insane amount of college basketball. Also, check out Titus's college basketball column on theringer.com right now. And check out our Ringer draft big board that we have. Jarks, O'Connor, Danny Chow. I think those are the 3 writing it. Got to get Titus in there too. But we've been doing this big board. And every time they put Malik Monk 4 spots lower than he should be, and it makes me mad. But our college basketball content has really heated up. So check that out. Check out the Ringer U podcast. Subscribe now, and check out Titus's column on the Ringer. I also wanted to mention we're taping this on a Monday, and we announced our Andre the Giant documentary, which is my dream sports doc project dating back to when I created 2007, created 30 for 30. Andre the Giant was at the top of every list we made. Always impossible to pull off because the WWE just loved Andre and wanted to wait for the right time and the right situation, the right place. And it took a long, long time to get to the moment where we could announce it that we're going to do it. And I think, when you just talk about the footage, when you talk about the stories that people have about this guy, when you talk about the one-of-a-kind character that he was, like really, you talk about unicorns now with Porzingis and Giannis and people like that. This guy was the ultimate sports unicorn. There's never been another. And, we have a chance to make a really good movie about it. A great director named Jason Hare doing this with HBO and The Ringer and the WWE, obviously. But we're very excited. It got announced today, and I think it's in the right hands, and it's time. So we're going to talk a little bit later. We're going to talk to David Shoemaker about Andre and about WrestleMania coming up. First, we're going to talk to Brian Koppelman, who is my longtime friend, who is the co-creator of Billions and is a giant, giant Knicks fan. And we're going to talk some Knicks and some Billions. So here we go. On the line right now, my old friend Brian Koppelman, the co-creator of Billions. Once upon a time wrote a movie called Rounders, which I've only referenced in 10 million different columns. Did a podcast for Grantland way back when, and is one of the top 7 most tortured Knicks fans that I know, which is the real reason we're calling, even though Billions premiered last night, actually, on Showtime.
No, you're right. It premieres this coming Sunday night, February 19th.
Oh, I already watched it. It was on demand. I didn't even know when it premiered.
Yeah. You can get it on demand early.
Yeah. I love that the networks do that now. I watched The Missing early on Stars, too. I watched that one on demand. That was great. I love when everything's just available and at my fingertips. But let's talk Knicks first. So,
anything you want.
17 years at Dolan. And there's been some low points. I even thought we might have hit a nadir with Isaiah. And yet this feels even worse. How are you feeling? Have you given up hope? Can you win? Can you even compete for a finals if James Dolan is your owner?
Wow, man. It's so, first of all, the thing you said a second ago about that I had a podcast for Grantland. I just want to say that you giving me that podcast was such a big deal in my life. I'm so grateful for it. It's still going, and it was great. And that started because I did this podcast with you years ago. So thanks for that.
It's called The Moment.
You gave me a place to vent. Yes, and you gave me a place to vent about the Knicks. I used to write about the Knicks for Grantland too.
Right.
And The last piece I wrote was called "The Knicks Suck," and it was about how they'll always suck as long as Dolan is in charge. And I mean, I was thinking about it when the Oakley thing happened the other night, obviously, and I got, hundreds of texts and tweets, and it's heartbreaking. And I was thinking, well, how different is that from Van Gundy being dragged by Alonzo Mourning across the floor? And just the ignominy of being a Knicks fan, the pain and humiliation is just endless. So finals, can they get to the finals? Like even that idea to me sounds so absurdly hopeful. That to have faith in it. And I'm a Phil Jackson fan. I believe Phil's working hard at this, and I believe that Phil is, one of the smartest basketball people of our lifetimes. He's proven it. But I don't know if it's not even a Dolan curse. It's not as magical as that. I don't know if the evil of Jim Dolan can be defeated by any mortal.
I was on TV doing the ESPN NBA show when they hired Phil Jackson. It was the second year I was on the show. And listen, I've been wrong a million times. But I was a voice crying in the wilderness, just being skeptical about the fact that a guy in his 70s who lived in Los Angeles, who had never held a front office job before, would suddenly be able to compete as a GM with these guys who have either been doing it for years, like Danny Ainge, who has this whole full staff of people around him that it's just become like a clinic how they put it together, or somebody like Daryl Morey, who's breaking down all this advanced metric stuff and doing a bunch of scouting, or, there's 10, 12, 13 pretty competent and good GMs who on weekends are like in Turkey watching some center prospect, or they're at the Pac-12 championships. And I was just really dubious that he could pull this off just because he's the Zen master and he's going to figure it out. And then he comes in, the Kurt Rambis thing was crazy. The giving up on Fisher as fast as they did, unless there was more to the story, that was weird. Trying to do a triangle when the whole league has moved to 3-pointers. I didn't understand that. And I got to say, I'm not surprised by any of this. I'm not surprised by one thing that's happened over the last 3 years. Deep down, you can't be surprised, right?
No, I mean, I'm not surprised because of the Dolan of it all, right? But I do see. So I've come to know Phil a little bit over the past year.
Okay.
And I see how much I didn't know him before, but I've had like 5 dinners with him this year. I know him now.
Wow.
And I really like him and see how much he cares about this. He knows this way more than you think he does about not only the statistical breakdown of these people, he knows all the players. He knows their strengths and weaknesses. He is obsessed. I would say that I thought from afar beforehand that it would be like, obviously on Twitter, like, I think Trump's a disaster, and part of it is that he's this guy who's 70 years old, so he's set in his ways. And so I understand your point. But when I sit with Phil, what I see is you can ask Phil, about Justin Holiday, and I'll talk about Justin, his brother, what happened, how they came up, the difference in the two of them, why they're players. So he is not clueless and out of it. I just think that situation is incredibly difficult. And I think it's difficult for tons of reasons, mostly because I also think Carmelo is terrible. There's this narrative that Porzingis is, Porzingis even said it, I have so much to learn from Carmelo. But when I think of it, I think that Carmelo is like Denzel in Training Day, and that Porzingis is Ethan Hawke, and he has to find a way really quickly to recognize what he's dealing with and know he can't actually learn from this guy.
Yeah, and I would say Porzingis, it's been bad for him to be on this team this year. And I actually think he might be worse at basketball than he was 3 months ago. And I'm a huge Porzingis fan, but I have not seen progress.
I know, you named him the Unicorn. I think you came up with Unicorn, right? Which to me is the best nickname for him ever.
I just haven't seen progress, and I don't blame him 1% because he's on this team that has these two ball-dominant guys. And especially like the last 7 minutes, which is really when you need your reps, when you're going to be a special player. And he's just a decoy. He might as well be like Sam Perkins in the 1996 finals, just kind of standing 25 feet away.
I've been thinking of Channing Frye, who was so great until Larry Brown ruined him.
Right.
And Channing Frye had a real chance, and then Larry Brown ruined him as a coach. And Porzingis is way, way, way more gifted, and I want him on the team forever. But I think he needs to be out of sort of the influence of Carmelo. But really, it's an emotional. I mean, this is the thing. Even when you rooted for the Sox, who didn't win, or the bad years for the Patriots after Plunkett, and like, you've never lived through what we lived through, which is just this totally dispiriting, crushing, every day something horrible and painful. You know, I have a 21-year-old son who's a diehard, lifelong, and it's just over and over, nothing but crushing disappointment. And the emails I get every day from people who are like, you know, want to just continue to cut it. It hurts. Who are the other six, by the way? Who do you have? You said I'm like around the seventh. Who are a couple who are as bad as me?
Wait, Sammy's 21? I'm still reeling from that piece of information. What year at Harvard is he? Is he a junior?
Yeah.
When is he gonna work for the Ringer?
Amazing?
When do I have to like start like carving out a little spot
for him? I mean, if I were you, I'd be locking him in pretty quickly. And by the way, he made me listen to the Durant. Him and my friend Jeff were like, you got to listen to the Durant episode. And I did, and now I know no matter what, this is 17 levels of disappointment for people, because that's one of the best podcasts I've heard in 5 years.
Oh, thanks. It certainly was an unconventional podcast. I've never taped a podcast at 1 o'clock at night. The Knicks fans.
You guys got talking in a way. Yeah. You guys got talking. You got him talking in a way I've almost never heard a professional athlete talk, and that was really a special thing. And if anyone hasn't heard it, they got to go back and hear it. I mean, that was. Thank you. You did it. Like, that was high level.
You know what's funny about it is he was better in the podcast than I was. I have a lot of regrets. I was like half awake. I'm usually asleep by 12:30. Durant's like the NBA players. They're like peaking and they go to bed at like 4 a.m. But there's a couple things we're gonna do it again. I think next month, and there's a couple.
I think I viewed it differently. I thought you were using your tiredness the way like a movie detective would, where you just kind of slowly were like, yeah, but isn't it? And then you got him going. I thought it was like full Columbo, man. There was no.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, he was amazing, and the funny thing is, he could have gone for 3 hours, but you know, it was doing that pod with him on Wednesday and not knowing what was going to happen in OKC, and you know, he knew he was going to get booed. He knew it wasn't going to be a pleasant experience, but there was a level of anger and hostility and vitriol in the arena that I thought I just thought it was a little too far. It just was too angry, and it made me uncomfortable. And the only time I can remember, a couple times with Celtics games, like the game after Ralph Sampson punched Jerry Sichting in the finals, when he came out the next thing, and the Garden crowd was so mad. And it was at that level, and they're booing him, and that's sports. And it was the same thing the next year with Bill Laimbeer in the Eastern Conference Finals after he had decked Bird and Parrish punched him the next game, and just real hatred for him. But the only time I ever remember feeling like the crowd was crossing the line in a way that made me uncomfortable in a Boston game was the wife beater chants at Jason Kidd in the 2002 Eastern Finals, where it's going on, and you're just like, wow, this has gone to a personal level that it just this isn't what sports is about.
See, I don't like that one, because I understood that one, but
the problem was she was there, and that's what pushed it over the top. Is she was in the third row. One of the games she was sitting right in front of me, and it crossed some line that I just didn't make me feel great, and I did feel a twinge of that during OKC.
What I was thinking of yesterday was when, because Dolan makes the big show of bringing Spree to the Knicks game. And I was thinking that the Garden, when Spree came back and was making the choking gestures at Dolan and got in his face, the Garden was like that. Like, I was at that game, and it was one of the only times we went full-throated. Like, the entire Garden was full throttle, full throat on Dolan, behind Latrell. And it was... it was as electric in a dark way as the Jeremy Lin days were electric in a positive way, and it was all directed at. Finally, there's an avatar for us, Latrell, telling Dolan what we think of him.
Right.
And so I want to see the movie of the day. I want the 24 hours that got Latrell sitting next to him. I don't understand. That seems to me like the biggest player move that Dolan has ever made. Like, to somehow get, what did he have to do to get Spree sitting there? Like, is there money Spree was owed in 10 years and Dolan said, I'll forward it 8 years to you now? Like, what do you think happened? Did someone hand a bag to Spree?
Yeah, I think there it felt a little monetary would be my guess. I'm sure he was compensated for his travel. I'm sure he flew him in. I'm sure he stayed at a beautiful hotel, first class tickets, and probably greased his palms a little bit. And you know what? Here's the difference for me with Dolan versus like some of the other terrible owners that have happened over the years, like Dan Snyder, and even though Steinbrenner had a lot of success, but just how irrational Steinbrenner was. And then you watch like what's happening with Trump now, where it's just so unpredictable day to day. He's going to change his mind on stuff. He's going to fire people, all that stuff. Dolan's the opposite. Dolan hires the person and then just completely trusts him. Like he said, I thought the Michael Kay interview that he did that was one of my big takeaways was Dolan was so adamant about, look, I made a deal with the guy. I told him this was his team. What can I do? This is his show. I can't renege on my deal with Phil. And I'm thinking like, well, first of all, you can totally renege on it. You're the owner. But I think in a weird way, his biggest weakness is that he doesn't meddle enough. Does that make sense?
Well, I don't know. I don't think that like some of the GMs before Phil would say that, right? I mean, I'm sure you've heard all the stories, and I've heard them too about the way the Melo trade went, and I believe that Dolan put himself right in the middle.
Oh,
of
but they didn't really have did they have a GM at that time that really was empowered? Because the only two people that he really empowered were Isaiah and Phil Jackson. I don't remember him really empowering anybody else to that degree.
Right, I agree. Yes, no, not the way that he has Phil. But who knows? Look, when you have a billionaire's son given a franchise like this, and it's this many years later, and he still hasn't done anything on his own except become a decent guitar player, it's time to recognize what he is.
A disaster?
And yeah, an unmitigated, horrible disaster. And you know, there are good people. As I said, I think Phil has blown me away with his knowledge of all these players and the league, and whether the results are on the floor, he is super present. I know Steve Mills. Steve Mills and I went to the same high school, who is, you know, the other guy there, and he's been a Knicks lifer. And I just think it's Dolan. I think if there was a different owner, there would be a different atmosphere. There would be a different kind of possibility of life. I mean, listen, you know, you can argue about whether Willie and the others should get more playing time, but that's not, you know, it's not really about how they're managing this group of players. It's about the entire vibe and feeling and culture that comes from above.
So I've had it.
As I said when I was on Seth Meyers one night, to me, Jim Dolan is like Fredo Corleone, but worse, because at least Fredo was banging cocktail waitresses 2 at a time. So that's, you know, and that is what I believe.
So I've had it. I've had runs like you're having, not as long, not as depressing, but like the Celtics after Bird retired, when it was the old owner, who was another owner's son, the rich guy's son, 9 out of 10 times is a disaster, because it's somebody who didn't make his money his own way, who basically had everything handed to him from day one and just doesn't think the same way somebody who it's the difference between Frank Sinatra and Frank Sinatra Jr., right? Frank Sinatra Jr., I saw him in the Grammys and Memorial montage. It's like Frank Sinatra Jr. singer. And it's like Frank Sinatra Jr. was a singer because his dad was Frank Sinatra. And I think that's the case with some of these owners, but we had stretches like this in Boston, like the Patriots had terrible owners. I think the difference with the Knicks is that it's been this way now pretty much continuously with some successful hiccups for 40 years. And people seem to think like, oh yeah, the Knicks, they're one of the marquee franchises. It's the Lakers, Celtics, and the Knicks. And it's like the Knicks have won 2 titles since 1946. You know, the Knicks have had.
Bill, I think that's only people our age. It's only people our age who still think that they're a marquee franchise. Knicks fans all have second favorite teams now, man. You know what I mean? Like Knicks fans root for. You have to. If you're a Knicks fan, it's justified to have a second favorite team that you know you're going to be pulling for in the playoffs. That's just how it is.
Like you're just rooting for a specific player or something. Yeah, I get that. But the thing is, like,
yeah, like Sammy's rooting for LeBron. Like Sammy will always root for LeBron. Like
right.
That's his. Because the age he was. So it's like the Knicks, and when the Knicks are clearly done, you switch. I've always rooted for the Mavericks for some reason. I like Mark, and I've been like rooted for the Mavericks. But like that, you have a second favorite team if you're a Knicks fan. I think that's just part of it because you can't have any faith.
But the tantalizing thing, and the thing that keeps sucking people back with the Knicks. First of all, you have 7 generations of fans, or not 7, 7 decades of fans, which is basically like 5 generations.
Yes.
And you're talking about like, the famous screenwriter William Goldman, who's still sitting there courtside, who's in my top 7 most tortured Knicks fans. But he's been going since the 60s.
He's above me.
Yeah, he's in his late 70s now. And his generation has been rooting for the Knicks since, DeBusschere and Willis were there. And then you have people like your son and people younger than that. And you think about that, you have there's just not a lot of NBA teams that can span 70 plus years of fans. And the other thing I've noticed with them, the Knicks have had these moments over the years, right? Everybody points to the Riley's Knicks, and even like the incredible 1999 strike season, the run when Ewing got to hurt, Camby, all that stuff, and you get just a great couple years out of Sprewell and all that whole run. But you've also had these little hiccup moments, like when Marbury was traded. I went to a couple of those playoff games. Like there was a 3-month run there with Marbury and the Knicks when that was like a thing.
Know.
Bernard King for a year and a half. That was a thing. Like those, when you have the right team and the right player.
April 27th. Come on, April 27th. April 27th, 1984.
Yeah,
that was the high point. That
was
was
that
it.
game
When
5?
Bernard against Isaiah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Bernard against Isaiah.
That's
game 5. It was my. Bill, That was my 18th birthday. That was the night of my 18th birthday. Was that game? That's how watching that game on TV was my 18th birthday, and it was as good a birthday as I've ever had.
Yeah, that's
because of what that game was. And that was like the best moment we've had, man.
That's one of the best round 1 playoff games of all time. And I actually remember where I watched that game because Bernard's running 2-hand follow-up dunk in overtime was like the greatest non-Celtics moment of my life up to that point. And I went in my room and I just did it on my Nerf hoop for an hour after that. It was just, nobody had the 2-handed running follow-up like that. But you've had these moments and the crowd is great. And now that I went to Golden State's game on Wednesday night against the Bulls. And that crowd has completely changed. That used to be the most diverse, all kinds of classes and ethnicities and just everything. And now it's just the wealthiest crowd in the league. And it's not the same crowd. It's a good crowd. It's not the crowd that it was. And I still think MSG and Boston, when they bring their fastballs, and I hate to say it, but the right Lakers team with the right people in the stadium, that's a great crowd too. There's some classics, but New York is at the top. And Linsanity, those 3 weeks, the crowd, the way, I mean, that's what's frustrating about this is when the Knicks are good and the NBA is more fun.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wrote this thing for Grantland called Carmelo Anthony Joy Wrecker about that night, about when he came about Jeremy Lin, that run, and how magical and how special that run was, and what it felt like to end. And when D'Antoni, it was the day D'Antoni was fired, that I wrote the thing, knowing and all that might be the last great moment. While Dolan is the owner, I have to tell you that about 2 months ago, I was invited to play in one of those like charity poker tournaments, and I get there and I go sit at my table, and sitting right next to me, like the other person who hadn't paid to go but who was asked to be there, was Charles Smith, who caused me as much pain. And he's sitting to my left at the poker table, and I don't know what to do. I don't know. Do I turn to this guy and say, "You don't know, you're responsible for a week of sleepless nights for me and nightmares"? And I wimped out. I couldn't. He was such a nice guy. The problem was, he couldn't get up there. He couldn't be aggressive. And he was just such a sweet dude that I couldn't. It was killing me. I just wanted to say you, and I couldn't. I failed. Do you think you could you have stepped up in that moment and said something, you think?
Can I defend Charles Smith for a second?
Not yet. Try. I said he was a nice guy.
He's trying to score.
Go ahead, defend him.
He's trying to score against two of the greatest athletes in the history of the league. He got fouled on at least two of those things really badly. Like Pippen at one point just hacks him, and they're just not calling anything because it's Jordan and Pippen. And I don't know, man. There's that under the basket replay where it's like, wow, if that happened in the internet era now, I don't think Charles Smith's a GOAT. I think everybody's reaction is going to be, how the hell did they not call? We have better, better pictures. The cameras are better. It's tough.
This is amazing.
I know.
If this was one of your players, there's no way you'd say that any of this.
No,
I mean, he had an duty, an obligation, he had a sacred obligation to get up to the hoop.
But that's who he was. He was a finesse power forward. Like, he wasn't this wasn't Sean Kemp under the basket jumping up and dunking people. He was.
Well, I didn't. The point is, I couldn't. I did last. I made sure to bust him out of the table, but that's all I could do. All I could do was
if you watch that game pretty carefully, there were lots of different ways you could have put away that game. But I will remind Knicks fans, because they seem to leave this part out. It was a 2-2 series. This wasn't like Bill Buckner. This wasn't even the Atlanta Falcons just completely falling apart in the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl. This was, if you win the game, you're up 3-2. You still have to go back to Chicago for Game 6. You're still going against the greatest player of all time. I don't know.
Come on. It was the moment you knew the series was. It was the moment you knew the series was over.
Yeah, you weren't coming back and winning Game 6. To me, Game 6 of the '94 Finals is the one that would keep me awake at nights, because that was so winnable. And God, man, just the fact that your whole championship relied on John Starks having to make like a 3-pointer with a hand in his face, like that, you didn't have any better option than that, was probably why I didn't win the title.
The thing is, when I think about Starks and Mason, right, and I got to write Mason's eulogy for Sports Illustrated, which is one of my favorite things I could ever written out of all the movies, like everything. I got to write Mason's obituary for SI, and as you know, I'm not a sports writer, so like just to get to do that was incredible. But those guys played above who they were for so long.
I agree.
Like, if you think about the idea in all these books now, like the Daniel Kahneman and Gladwell about everyone returning to the mean, like of course John Starks had to return to being a guy who was what he was, which was not even as good a version of Vinnie Johnson or something. He was just a guy who could get incredibly hot and be unconscious and worked so hard, and so did Mason. Like, those teams tried. So they gave everything. So I didn't, when you lose, you were heartbroken. When the finger roll didn't go, it was devastating. But, those guys were out there working so hard. Whereas I look at this team now and I see our leader is, just not a guy who knows how to, yes, he's the 25th leading scorer of all time, but every coach who's ever had him would say he doesn't make the other guys better, he makes them worse.
Well, the other thing with Carmelo that's pretty much irrefutable is he pushed for that trade to happen in 2011 when he could have just signed with them as a free agent that summer. And he did it because he wanted to make more money. But they gave up a bunch of assets that actually would have helped him if, he was really serious about winning the title. He tried to have it both.
Dolan was a bad poker player.
Yeah.
Dolan was a bad poker player. And
he really was.
He didn't understand the hand that he was sitting with. He didn't know that Carmelo's wife wanted to come that badly to New York. I think he probably did know, and he just couldn't, just sit there at the poker table, let the blinds go, don't put all your chips in, let it go by, and then eventually wait for the right moment and make your move, and he did.
Well, and it's funny because there's a couple much lower level versions of this. The trade deadline's next week, right? Orlando needs to trade Serge Ibaka. He's not going to re-sign there. They need to give more playing time for Aaron Gordon, and it's starting to come out now, like Serge Ibaka is available. Who's going to get him? If you just go through the rosters, there's 13 teams that have a winning record right now, right? And you figure those 13, maybe 8 of them could use somebody like Serge Ibaka. If you just start crossing them off, Oklahoma City can't trade for him because you can't trade for a guy that you already traded for. Washington can't trade for him because they don't have the contracts. You get on the line, and there's really only 2 teams, Boston and Toronto, that have the contracts and the assets to actually get Serge Ibaka. So now this is like a poker match, as you said, with Dolan.
Right.
Dolan didn't even have the second suitor for Carmelo. He was the only suitor. And Denver somehow negotiated a really, really good deal that at the time...
Oh, yeah, you know what you just taught me?
What?
You know what you just made me realize? Is that he's not only Fredo. He's also the worst of Jack Waltz because he thinks a man in his position cannot afford to look ridiculous.
Right.
And he's so afraid of looking ridiculous that he's going to go up against Don Corleone and end up with the horse's head in his bed every fucking time.
So now he's in a situation with Carmelo where the Cavs just don't have the contracts, and they'd be insane to give up Kevin Love for him. The Clippers, they've already said they don't want to trade in their big guys. The Celtics, either they're playing possum or they're genuinely not interested. All my intel says they're just not interested. So now what do? You have Phil, who's undermined him. I don't buy the whole, everybody's like, oh, Phil Jackson, what free agent would sign there now? It's like free agents go to where the money goes. You think somebody's going to be like, I can't sign there. I saw that Phil Jackson tweet 7 months ago.
No, they want to come to
they want to come to
New York City, too.
But I just don't know if there's a market for him. And
do you think LeBron would trade Kevin Love for Carmelo?
Short answer, yeah. But I think he would. I think you can't make that trade unless you get a second asset. You got to involve a third team, and you have to get 2 players for Kevin Love. I personally wouldn't do it. Like, if you just flip Kevin Love for Carmelo, and they play the Warriors in the finals, the Warriors would destroy Carmelo. All they would do for 4 quarters every game is figure out how to put Carmelo in pick and rolls, and they would just torch him. So you'd have to get a second guy, I think. But like for the Celtics, we have probably the best fourth quarter scorer in the league. The guy's unstoppable. Why do we need Carmelo? Now we have to throw Carmelo the ball, and everybody's got to stand around.
He's just torched us. Isaiah has just torched us, man.
The league has moved toward guys like him.
Unreal.
I still think
he's unreal. If
the Clippers figured out how to flip all of their side pieces into Carmelo, that would be the move. Back to Koppelman in 1 second. Quick break to talk about MeUndies. You probably missed the Valentine's Day window. Don't forget, by the way, Tuesday's Valentine's Day. Whoever you're dating claims they don't care, but they do. Don't believe them. That doesn't mean, even though Valentine's Day has passed, that you can't splurge on some great underwear. It's the first thing you put on every day. It's the last thing you take off. Why settle for anything less? MeUndies. I think they were one of the sponsors for our first podcast. They sent me some underwear. I've been wearing them ever since. They're made entirely out of modal, a fabric that's 3 times softer than cotton, unbelievably comfortable. I don't know how many times I have to tell you, the top drawer of my dresser is full of MeUndies. Once you go MeUndies, you never go back. The world's most comfortable underwear. And guess what? If you don't love MeUndies for whatever reason, I can't imagine what that reason would be, they will refund you, and they will let you keep the first pair. And for a limited time, my listeners get 20% off their first order, plus free shipping. They're making it so easy for you to buy some great underwear. You have to go to MeUndies.com/BS. Those are my initials. And you get that 20% off plus the free shipping. So just do it. MeUndies.com/BS. With the MeUndies Better Day Guarantee, you have nothing to lose. Don't wait any longer. Go to MeUndies.com/BS right now for 20% off your first order. Again, MeUndies.com/BS. Back to Brian Koppelman. Wait, we got to talk about Billions really quick. It's only season 2. How many episodes did you do last year?
12 last year, 12 this year.
Right. So there's a lot of time, in my opinion, because this show's going to be on for a long time and it's a very enjoyable show. There's a lot of time for you to write the James Dolan proxy character, the legacy kid who deals with acts, who basically had everything handed to him and is the Fredo Corleone, but also just happens to have a lot of power because his dad passed it on to him. This is your chance. This is your chance to get James Dolan back. Create the proxy James Dolan character for Billions, and there you go. That's season 3.
I mean, I think that, first of all, you get me the problem is if I start trying to create a Dolan kind of character, you know what I mean? If it's like Eddie Mush from The Bronx Tale, if you put it anywhere near the thing, it would ruin everything. So I don't think that I can. He's Eddie. Oh yeah, that's also what it is. He's also Eddie Mush. He ruins everything he touches. And so I can't get him near Billions. This thing is going too well. The show's too strong. People like it too much. You got Lewis and Giamatti and these titans going at each other. And we certainly reference all the stuff that we care about, but I think I'm going to keep knocking across the streams. So
like season 5, when you're running out of ways to make this Lewis versus Giamatti thing work, that's probably when Axe buys an NBA team, right? And then you can just completely shift,
sure.
Right?
What Dave and I say to each other sometimes is that's a season 6 idea. We'll be like, that's the season 6 idea.
He buys the Brooklyn Nets.
But you'll
Axe
come
is in the NBA.
Wait, you'll write that episode. You can write the episode.
when Axe buys the Brooklyn Nets from Prokhorov, or tries to, and Prokhorov screws him off at the last minute, screws him over.
Yeah, you want to write the freelance episode, do the first draft?
I just want to
You
be
can
in
do the first draft.
I just want to be in the writer's room for 2 hours as you plan it out. Or maybe
Okay.
Axe no, you know what Axe would do? Axe would do like the guys who bought the Milwaukee Bucks and were like, yeah, we're gonna keep it here. We love Milwaukee, it's great. And then they got the team and they're like, hey, you guys have 2 years to build a stadium, we're moving to Seattle. Gotta do it right now.
That's awesome. So so he said we could say Mark Lazary has given us some advice. He's the guy. He's the billionaire.
Right.
And he has given us some advice on what these hedge fund guys are like. Like, Lazary is super I mean, Lazary said a couple of things to us that ended up as quotes, like basically ideas just ideas that then Bobby Axelrod was able to put in stuff, have come from Lazary. That guy's brilliant, man.
I would
brilliant.
guess rich people and all the people that work for and in the periphery of rich people must love this show and come up with you and be like, Axe reminds me of this. This reminded me of that.
Yeah,
you must get that all the time.
Yeah, but the biggest surprise to us is actually like all sorts of people. First of all, I was surprised. I didn't realize this, but a lot of rappers love the show. Like, not famous and famous hip-hop guys are tweeting at me constantly about how much they love the show and love Bobby Axelrod.
That's a surprise?
And then lawyers
Why were you surprised by that?
I just didn't know that, like, I knew New York and L.A. would love it. I didn't know, like, that the world, like, that all these people all across the country, like, lawyers love Giamatti and that Giamatti's trying to take him down.
Yeah.
And all these people are celebrating Bobby Axelrod, which, I was interested in sort of seeing whether people would root for Axe, even as he does, like, worse and worse shit. But they do root for him a lot of the time. You root for Axe, right?
Yeah, it's because he's got those shirts. He's got those power shirts. I have this one shirt that I wear that in the Ringer office, they're like, oh, you're wearing your Axe shirt today. It's like one of those, what do you call those? The collarless tight shirts?
Yeah, sure. Like one of those, like,
the Axe power shirt. Listen, I think people love shows and movies about rich people, and you guys were really smart to create this the way you did. I remember I had Andy Greenwald on a podcast like 3-4 years ago, and we were just talking about why isn't there another OC? How is that show just not on all the time? Like the soap opera set in a rich place, and we were joking about a show called The Hamptons, and we didn't even really have the idea. It's just rich people in the Hamptons being rich. And now you look at like not just billions, but even The Affair, and just like people like going into those worlds and they like being at rich parties. And, I don't know.
Well,
I think you've mastered
if you look at it, like if you look at the fact that before he was president, Trump and Cuban were like the biggest reality stars.
Yeah.
We looked at that and we were like, what is it about these guys? Cuban's a great guy and a force for good in the world, I think. But, like, what is it that makes success and influence suddenly stand in for quality of character? Like, Americans, we root for these people for some reason. So it wasn't about, like, showing the rich porn. Like, that stuff's obviously in the show. But living in New York, and Levine lives in Greenwich, and the two of us just looked at it and looked at the way these people were living, and we were like, it's no different than the guys in Rounders, really.
Yeah.
It's like people living by their wits and considering themselves outsiders and gunslingers, and them trying to, like, remake the world the way that they want to serve their needs. And that's the story we wanted to tell. And then luckily we found a setting that is compelling and that people like. But for us, dude, we still can't believe that we get to have our own show where every one of these references, we threw in all the other movies. That in one episode we can reference Goodfellas, The Godfather, Tracy Lords, and all this shit. And that people not only watch it, but quote it back to us online. I mean, it is like we're finally have our own franchise to make in our image, to be the extension of all the stuff that we've been writing about for 20 years,
Yeah, you're in the rich guy world. You're also in the hedge fund world, which I don't know anything about and has never really been captured in a TV show like this. And then you just have the mano a mano, just two dudes trying to destroy each other world, which has worked for God knows how many years in movies. It's smart.
Well,
it's
that's
a well-constructed
that's
show.
right back to Bruno Sammartino against Larry Badisco.
Right.
That's two guys, equally matched with a real grudge going at each other.
You know, you probably didn't know. We just announced it like an hour ago, and I know you're busy today, but we announced the Andre the Giant documentary is finally happening in HBO. That was my dream project for 10 years.
Awesome. I did not know that.
I know you love Andre. So
Who's
yeah,
directing it?
Jason Hare, and the WWE is going to be involved, and we're going to, this is my number one draft pick for 10 years. You did. I
will tell you something true.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you something true. I did the 30 for 30 on Jimmy. Dave and I
Jimmy Connors.
did the 30 for 30 on Jimmy Connors.
One of my faves. A good one.
Which Rolling Stone called that the fifth best one ever. But I want to tell you a statistic. I have 2 Andre the Giant T-shirts that I still wear to this day.
Wow.
I have 2 Andre the Giant T-shirts. And Dan Soder, who plays Maffei on our show and is a great stand-up comic, he's a huge wrestling guy, and he has an Andre the Giant shirt. And there have been days when we both wore Andre the Giant shirts to set, and Damian Lewis looked at us like, "What the fuck is this? Is that Andre the Giant? And you're not wearing them ironically?" And it's like, "No, we're not. We're not wearing them ironically. We're wearing them. We're wearing them proudly. The opposite of ironically."
Who did the S&M research for your show? You or Levine?
Right? Isn't that a good question?
One of you did it. One of you did it. All right, don't answer. One of you did it, though.
I'll answer.
Okay.
It came from the Girlfriend Experience. When we were interviewing the prostitutes, the escorts for the Girlfriend Experience, all of them would say to us at the end of so you'd have your laptop open and they're telling you, this guy took me to Mallorca, and they're telling you these amazing stories, and then at the very end, to a person, the women would lean in and they'd say, "I have one more thing to tell you." And we'd say, "What?" And they would name some incredibly powerful titan of business. And they would say, "That guy wants me to peg him." And you go, "What?" And they would say, "Yeah." And it was like, and we carried that idea. So we didn't end up putting that directly. We have a guy in a diaper in Girlfriend Experience. We didn't put it directly in Girlfriend Experience. But when we were thinking about this character, and then you think about Spitzer and all these prosecutorial characters who misbehave in some way, we were like, well, he's not going to misbehave. It's going to be in his marriage, but we're going to give him this thing. And the idea being, he has to find he's in so much control, has so much power, exerts it all the time. Well, maybe the only way he can be present is if he is forced to lose all that and be in a sexually dominated position. And so that's where that came from. And
well, it helps that the actress.
There was no personal research.
Okay, yeah. It helps that the actress is fantastic. That's been the revelation for me because I didn't watch her other show, so I it's cool sometimes when you watch a show and you have no baggage with the person playing one of the lead characters. Yeah. Like one of the things with Giamatti for me is I've seen him in so many things. I always kind of feel like it's Paul Giamatti. And with Damian Lewis, it took me a while for him to stop being Brody from Homeland and being Axe. But now I'm there. He's Axe to me now. But Maggie Stiff, I was a blank slate. I just know her as this character.
You weren't are you not a Mad Men? See, Mad Men's my favorite show of all time.
Yeah, but I didn't even. Are you not? I love Mad Men. I never really made the connection that it was the same. Mad Men's thrown me off. I think it's because
she played Rachel Menken.
Yeah,
she played Rachel Menken, who was the department store owner in the first season.
Right.
And then then she did Sons of
Anarchy 10 years ago.
After that, but
yeah,
I guess it was. We love her, Maggie. 100 women read to that part when Maggie read. It was like, holy shit, she can do this. She is really as smart. She went to Bronx Science High School. She's a fucking genius, and it's so much fun being around her because she plays this character who's super smart, and she's even smarter than the character. She's smarter than all of us. And so, last season, I'm going to spoil last season because new season started. But, she kind of wins last season, and it was great writing that whole thing for her because we knew she would be able to pull off, basically defeating both of those guys and driving off in that way. And it was super satisfying that people thought it was this macho show about these two guys, and that what Dave and I did was actually have the woman win at the end of season 1.
Well, I'm really happy for you guys. I've known you for a long time. I think I've known you since...
You really have.
Maybe 2001. I did on one of my first year at ESPN. I did. I handed out Rounders quotes as awards for something, and you emailed me, and we became
the NBA.
Yeah, we became friends ever since. That's my last question. I always ask you this when you're on the pod. Rounders 2, how's it looking?
It's right today. I would say it's like they do that thing where it's like the extinction clock for the world or whatever.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it looks worse. We just haven't been able to make the deals.
No!
One day, we all want to do it, but it looks bad. Man. Today, it looks bad. Matt wants, listen, as you know, we talk to Matt and Edward about it all the time. The four of us want to do it. Malkovich is in. I think we could even, Matt said he could rope Turturro in. We just need someone to pass to write the script and make the movie. Then we could do it.
So when we
and it has to be during the off season of Billions.
Chris Ryan and I are doing Sports Movie Hall of Fame podcasts. When we do Rounders, I don't think I almost think we have to make Rounders like a 3-hour pod where we do our thing for an hour and then we bring you and Levine and maybe we just go for another hour and we just really break it down. But I want to do it correctly.
Levine and I are happy to do it. Levine and I are happy to do it, and we'll try to rope Maddie in too. I can't promise it because who knows where he is in the world, but we'll try to call Maddie in.
You know where he is right now? You know where he is right now? He's walking around with his fist raised because he roots for the best quarterback of all time and the best team of all time. That's where he is. He's walking around with his fist high up in the air, saluting Mr. Tom Brady.
And Levine is a Brady fan too, and we were texting the next day, and I had to be me with, I'm a Jets fan.
Yeah. And
Levine has been a Brady fan for a long time, and Matt obviously had his big victory.
Well, Rounders 2.
It was miserable.
Here's my thing.
Miserable. You get to win that again. Miserable. I mean,
I don't feel bad
I got to
at
be
all.
honest. I was so excited to tweet at you.
Yeah.
I was so excited to tweet at you the next day.
Well, you know what? Somebody has to win, and it's usually Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. That's all I can tell you. I'm not going to give up on Rounders 2, and one of the reasons I think it's still possible is because it's on all the time. It's still on. I have every movie channel. It's always on. And my theory with this is they're showing the movies on these cable channels because people are watching them every time they come on. There was a reason John Wick was on for a solid year. It's because people were watching John Wick when it came on. And Rounders is still on.
We were really,
it'll be on
really
Encore,
close.
all these
we
things.
We were really close 2 years ago. And a deal was kind of put on the table and then pulled. And Dave and I went and did this show instead. And, if none of us have given up on it. We talk about it all the time. We know the movie we would make. I'm telling you, Edward and Matt would do it with us. Malkovich too. I think we could get to Turturro. John Dahl would direct the movie. We all want John. We're trying to put the entire team back together. But so far, no one's been willing to write the check.
Affleck wants in. I know for a fact. And I'll tell you another thing. Yeah. If you have another version of the Welcome to the Chesterfield South scene, and I'm not at the table in a cameo, I'm never talking to you again. If I don't get to be in a cameo, just have me like whatever. Yeah. I could have an ace king and just get screwed in the flop. I don't care, but I need to be in one of those.
Sad. It's so sad that you asked for the cameo, not just trusting that we would come to you. It's a little bit sad.
I just want, and we'll never figure out why he didn't have sex with Famke Janssen in that scene after his girlfriend had already moved. That's your Scarlet Letter.
We got to save this for the round. I mean, that's got to be 10 minutes of the Rounders' greatest sports movie.
That's your Scarlet Letter. That's the Scarlet Letter of your screenwriting
career.
Thing
we've ever done.
Matt David's like, nah, you know what? I'm going to pass on the sex. I'm good.
I mean, I know that I told you this when we did the long 15,000-word thing, but I mean, that night we were shooting that scene. Matt did come up to Dave and me and say, "Now tell me again, why am I not sleeping with her?"
And do I have bronchitis? What's going on?
We can't answer it now. Well, the only thing we can say is the thing that no one ever. Okay, I can answer it. The thing that no one ever takes into account is that they had slept together before.
Oh, so maybe there was a reason he didn't want to.
I'm just saying they had slept together before. You know, it's different, right? If she's never done it or if she's done it.
He's rock bottom. He has no furniture. He needs money. Like, sex is going to make you feel better for 20 minutes.
It's true. He's sitting on his couch, watching Eric Seidel lose to Johnny Chan. That's his entertainment.
He's watching some old World Series of Poker. I'm good. I don't need any sex right now.
By the way, he's watching pre-Holcam World Series of Poker.
The worst
He's
kind.
literally watching World Series of Poker when you're the worst kind. And then Famke comes over, and he can't do it. Luckily, Dave and I have learned those lessons, and I can promise you that there's no analog to that in this season of Billions, which is why everybody should tune in, starting now on demand and then next Sunday night, and be with us for all 12 episodes.
All right, congratulations. Sad Levine for me. We have to do it. It's so tough for us to do a 3-man podcast with 2 people on the phone.
We'll do it when we're all in a room
do it
together.
When you're in LA. When you're in LA. And by the way, If you wanna, if you have time to write any angry Knicks pieces, the Ringer is waiting for you. We're always available if you want to vent. We're here.
All right. Well, I just figured you'd ask, so
Yeah,
that's
we're
it.
here.
I'm in.
All right. Good luck with
All right,
Billions.
great.
Thanks for coming
Bill.
on.
Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Levine says, hey, back. We'll talk soon.
Okay.
Bye.
All right. Bye. All right. We're going to bring in David Shoemaker to talk about Andre the Giant and upcoming WrestleMania, which I think is 33. But before we do that, let's talk about my friends at Harry's.com. They sent me some razors last year, and it changed my life. I do not get shaving cuts anymore. I don't get shaving zits on my neck anymore. I have a nice, clean, happy face. Thank you, Harry's. If you're not using their state-of-the-art German-engineered razors, I got to be honest, I actually feel sorry for you. I really do. I feel like genuine empathy that you're not using Harry's. If you're getting Harry's as a gift for your husband, your boyfriend, your dad, your grandfather, whomever, I feel it. If you're not doing that, I feel even worse. On Harry's.com right now, my listeners can get themselves a free trial set that includes their sleek Truman razor handle with a German-engineered 5-blade cartridge, foaming shave gel, and a travel cover. And guess what? Harry's is so confident in the quality of their blades. They want you to try this shave set for free. You heard that right. Free. All you have to do is cover a small shipping fee when you sign up. And that's it. You can try Harry's and get a great shave, and then you'll go back and you'll get more Harry's because it's great. That's a special offer for fans of the BS podcast. Again, go to harrys.com/BS right now and redeem your free trial set. harrys.com/BS. Pops right up. It thanks you for coming, mentions the podcast. You can't lose. Just do it. Your face will be very, very happy. All right. David Shoemaker coming up right now. All right. We mentioned the Andre the Giant documentary that's coming with, when I was talking to Koppelman, now David Shoemaker from The Ringer, formerly of Grantland. The Masked Man has the Masked Man podcast on Channel 33, one of the world's foremost wrestling experts.
I appreciate
also,
that.
the art director at The Ringer, a man of many hats.
Yeah, when I take the mask off, I have a full-time job.
This Andre doc, if we pull it off, I mean, this is like the number one draft pick for, I mean, for me, it's a number one draft pick for any sports doc, but at least for wrestling, this was always the great kahuna, correct?
Yeah, I'm glad you're calling your shot by just talking about it this far in advance, because it's got to be good now.
I don't see how it can't be good with
What made Andre so great at the time, and what makes him still so legendary to this day, is the fact that he was bigger than pro wrestling, which is just outsized and crazy to begin with.
Right.
I mean, like, you can't get anybody who ever met the guy to sit down for, if you ask him about Andre the Giant, you will get stories that blow your mind.
Yes. And that's usually we find, doing all the 30 for 30s over the year, when you have the compelling lead character and you have stories.
Yeah.
And you have good footage. That's it. It's impossible to screw up at that point. Okay. You really can't. If you have those three, if you have stories and awesome footage and somebody's compelling, you're good. And Andre, I've always been fascinated by, especially when YouTube came around and the wrestling footage started going up on there. And it was like, Andre was just this hazy memory of, I started watching wrestling, I think like 79, 80, somewhere in there. When I remember when Killer Khan broke his ankle, I really thought Killer Khan broke it.
Oh yeah.
The hospital footage of Andre with the thing. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe Killer Khan did that. And, just following him through the years there. And then at some point realizing, oh, that was the guy who played Bigfoot in $6 Million Man.
100%.
But he was so big that they never gave him the title. They didn't need to.
They didn't need to. I mean, you're right about YouTube. It was almost like, I'm just a couple years younger than you, but growing up watching, Andre versus Hogan and all that kind of stuff. When YouTube came about, it was almost like if like you're a kid today and you had no idea Barry Bonds was anybody except the Slugger, and then suddenly you get all this footage of him like being a really good young baseball player who could run and like do all this other stuff, except way bigger than that. But yeah, I mean, Andre was he was the quintessential division killer, which is what they call it in the business, right? He was like just too impressive to really hold a belt, because once you put the belt on him, there's no real competition.
Right.
So it was always, from the very beginning, he when he came to America in the 70s, he was wrestling, or came to the North America, he was wrestling in Canada, and he was a huge draw for a while, and then attendance tapered off, and eventually the promoter there kind of gifted him to Vince Sr., because he didn't know what to do with them, and Vince Sr.'s solution was to tour him around the country and to make him quit doing drop kicks and stuff, so he's just a giant. But I mean, you had to keep him moving, because if he stayed in one place too long, the magic sort of wore off. As crazy as that is, you show up to see how big this guy is, but then there's a limit to the stories you can tell with somebody like that.
Yeah, this 1970s Andre was so much more athletic, and I missed that Andre. I was there for the second phase of his career, which was he was still great. He had the giant afro.
Sure.
He was still athletic, could still move around, still do some stuff. But there's some early 1970s Andre on YouTube where it's like, wow, this guy moves like Porzingis.
Yeah. He was the wrestling unicorn. That's right.
How tall do we think he was? Because it does seem like he shrunk.
Yeah, well,
I think like his back started almost collapsing, but at some point he was like 7'2", 7'3", 7'4".
He was listed at 7'4".
But it was they always list him high.
They always list him. It's always a little fudging of the weight and the height, and Andre more than anybody else, just because you could just add the inches and the pounds, because who was going to question it? He's also going up against guys like his first big feud in Canada was this guy Don Leo Jonathan. Who was a giant there, and who knows? I mean, he was listed at 6'8" or something, but he might have been way shorter. So you have to make Andre taller to put him next to guys like Hogan, who they're listing at 6'6" or 6'7" or 6'8",
right.
and then Andre all of a sudden is 7'4". I don't know. There's pictures of him on the set of Conan where it doesn't look like he's not that tall.
Like he looks like 6'9".
Well, Wilt Chamberlain's 7'1",
yeah,
and he's shorter than Wilt in all their backstage photos. So,
but it does seem like he might have shrunk.
Sure, that's part of the. I mean, I think that's part of the condition that he had, the acromegaly or whatever. That you grow and grow and grow, and then your bones start hardening and sort of like folding back over onto themselves.
And the afro made him seem bigger too. The other thing Vince used to do when the old shows that they used to film in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and they would just bang out all the different things. But I think they did some camera chicanery.
Oh yeah.
And I think didn't Andre stood on something to make it seem like he was just twice the size of Vince? If you watch those things, he's like 2.5 feet taller than Vince.
That's a trick they still employ to this day sometimes. But yeah, the Andre shot, I think, is a real thing.
I don't really remember him feuding with anyone other than Killer Khan for a prolonged period of time. Like he had the Hogan feud when Hogan came in early and was the bad guy.
Right.
He had
the big Shea Stadium match.
Then there was like a big John Studd. He would just kind of feud with big guys, and they were always bad matches. But it was like, what the hell else could you do with Andre? He couldn't feud with like Don Morocco. He just would have killed him.
Yeah, I mean, some of the best booking that you can. I mean, it's really hard to decide what to do with Andre. You're right, because what the fans want. What the fans think they want to see is Andre versus Big John Studd, and then you put them in the ring together, and the fans immediately realize that's not what they want to see. Yeah. There was a period where he was wrestling and where he was doing the territories, and he was a tag team champion with Dusty Rhodes. They held the belt briefly, and Andre, the only belt. I mean, he might have had some singles titles, but I think it was he held tag titles around the country, but more often than not, just left and vacated them because they're, again, no storytelling. Yeah. But you can do a good tag team angle with him. If you have just the on fire baby face like Dusty Rhodes, nobody's more over than Andre the Giant, and then they can beat up the bad guys together, and Andre only has to get in the ring for 2 minutes a match.
And the other guy gets the crap kicked out of him, and he's trying to get over to Andre, and people are going, the best tag team match I can remember him having was the one with Snuka when it ended with Snuka jumped off his shoulders.
Right,
onto the guy,
that was a great tag team too. Yeah, I mean, it was
one of the all-time best tag team moments.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot that I mean, there's the thing with Andre. I mean, that I keep coming back to is the greatest stories and even storylines about Andre were outside the ring, right? I mean, there's a limit to what you can do in a wrestling ring with somebody with a presence as big as Andre. But when you start telling "quote unquote" real stories about him, that's when the excitement really happens.
And he was also, I would say, he had a 100% approval rating, which is pretty rare for wrestlers. And when he turned, it was painful. Like it hurt my feelings.
Yeah,
it was like, oh my god, no, Andre, you're evil, Andre. No,
it was very by the book in its way. You're talking about the Piper's Pit segment where he comes, they're giving out the awards and
it was perfect. He's jealous of Hogan,
and then he brings out Bobby Heenan.
A lot of people jealous of Hulk Hogan.
Yeah,
a lot of jealousy with that guy,
and with good reason. You know, he was getting a lot of opportunities. But yeah, I mean, it was so by the book in a lot of ways, but it was so compelling. Like I think I probably cried as a kid. Like I mean, I was never as heartbroken
as that. It's a complete betrayal. So much worse than Kevin Durant leaving Oklahoma City.
Yeah, I mean, the crazy thing about Andre, about his career when you look at it, you were talking about him when he was young and athletic, but like already by this point his health was in serious decline.
Yeah, he could barely make
I mean, he had WrestleMania 2, he had the Battle Royal, and Big John Studd was in that too. But like after that, he took time off. He just like he was already taking these huge breaks. He had back surgery. Killer Khan, when Killer Khan put him out, I think that was a surgery too. I mean,
Best Battle Royal guy ever.
Oh yeah. There's like if there's gifs all over the internet of him just like taking on 4 guys, and he actually makes it look good. He's like headbutting really quickly, one guy after another,
Double
and
headbutts.
knocking people's heads together. I mean, he's great. He's just, I mean, he's very good at that.
I don't want to spoil a lot of the beats and the stories that we'll probably have in this thing, but it was just you're the best person to talk wrestling with. I think the Andre thing. I remember going to see him at the Worcester Centrum in '89.
Yeah.
About 2 years after he had become Evil Andre, when he still had the one strap.
The one strap. Oh man.
He was just doing tag team matches, and he could barely move. And it was actually kind of sad to see him in person.
Yeah.
This was like, I'm gonna say '89. I remember I went with my old buddy, the Birdman, and they could hide it, they could fudge it. He was still amazing to see, but there just wasn't anything you could do with him, and you could tell it was heading toward not a great place.
Yeah, no, I mean it wasn't great when he took on Jake the Snake. Was it WrestleMania? What WrestleMania was that?
It was like 5 or 6.
Yeah, I think it was 6. I was watching it with my buddy the other day, and I was just like, he was like, what shape is Andre in this match? And I was just like, just try to count how many seconds he's not touching either the ropes or Jake the Snake.
Barely stand
and there
up.
were no seconds. I mean, he was just a walk from the ropes to Jake, and that was the only time he could stand up on his own.
Do you think WrestleMania 3, him versus Hogan, was the most important wrestling match of all time?
I mean, you can make that case. I think that wrestling, the hardcore wrestling fans will always throw anything with Hogan into question and whatever. But I think you have to say that Hogan. I mean, Ric Flair. If Ric Flair was the greatest ever, part of that was because what he did. Most of that was because of what he did on the mic. I mean, it's not all about what happens in the ring. It's the spectacle. And that WrestleMania 3 match was just as big as it gets. There was nothing.
I remember
like
Hagler Leonard was right around then too.
Yeah,
I can't remember if it was before or after. And that was one of the biggest boxing matches that I can remember, and there was so much hype for it. Sugar Ray, people forget like just how massively popular he was. And for me, Hogan Andre was like equal, and it was wrestling. But I just felt like I didn't know it was going to happen. Didn't know if Andre was actually going to sell Hogan and get pinned. It was the only time I remember watching a main event wrestling match really not knowing what the outcome was going to be.
Yeah.
Like having no feel at all for it. Are they going to squash this and do DQ, or is this going to go in some terrible place, or is he really going to get pinned by him?
Yeah, I mean that they did come back around to like the squashes and the DQs and the countouts. I mean, that's one of the things you have to do in wrestling, but especially with Andre to keep things interesting. But
remember when he almost pins Hogan in the first 2 minutes because he falls on him? And I remember I had like a VHS, rewinding it. It's a pain in the ass. Watching that 20 times, being like, I think Andre thought he won. I think this was a legitimate fight. Andre really seems to think he won this.
If you talk to Hulk Hogan, you talk to any of the big names that wrestled Andre, this is the most central thing about a match with Andre the Giant, is that he would let you look good during the match, but you could only do what he let you do. Right? So Hulk Hogan and a lot of these guys sort of have this vested interest in making wrestling seem real, even though we all know it's fake now. There's a second level on which it's a real thing, and Andre the Giant is the go-to, like is exhibit A for this.
Right.
Because Hogan will always say, he wouldn't have been able to slam Andre if Andre wasn't in on it.
Sell it, yeah.
And it's sort of like this emotional victory, or this like personality-based victory that's at the core of it. And yeah, I mean, if Andre, I mean, there's some, to a certain extent, that's really true. If Andre wanted to just like put you on the ground, I mean, look what he did to Chuck Wepner. I mean, if he just wanted to like just get rid of you, he could do it. He was really that strong.
There's, I think, one pseudo shoot match in Japan where the guy took some liberties and Andre just destroyed him.
Yeah,
Andre was like, really? And just killed the guy.
Andre was like dad strength to like the nth degree. He could like he looked big and scary, but he was stronger than what he looked like.
I think he is one of the all-time sports unicorns, and he's certainly the all-time wrestling unicorn.
Oh yeah,
and that's one of the reasons, that this is such a good idea for a doc. Is just like, this guy was never be another Andre. I can't imagine we would see this again. And also, like, if you had that pituitary gland problem now,
you get it fixed.
You get it fixed when you're 18, and it's just, and that was part of what makes it so compelling is he had this condition that he knew he wasn't going to have a long life.
Yeah, I mean, and he was in an era before. I mean, he as far as I know, he wasn't into like pain pills or anything, but he was in an incredible amount of pain, so he was just doping with booze, and of course one thing we haven't talked about is some of the craziest stories of Andre are his drinking stories.
The 100 beers in one night.
136.
Don't drink against Andre, you'll lose.
No, you'll die. I mean, it's a crazy amount of booze that he could supposedly consume, and I mean, just a case of wine on a bus ride from one venue to another. I mean, just absolutely insane stuff. And that's another thing we'll never hear again, because even if, I mean, Wade Boggs used to drink, used to always drink like 40 beers on a plane ride, but like you would never hear that about an athlete now. One, because they wouldn't do it, but two, because if they did, they would never let it get out, Well,
all of those stories, my whole thing is like somebody like that, everybody who crossed paths with them is going to have two stories. And I have a feeling a few of them are going to involve alcohol.
I think so.
And Andre just putting passed out people in taxis. Like when I had Schwarzenegger on, he told this whole story about him, Wilt Chamberlain, and Andre going to dinner and Arnold paying the check, even though nobody was allowed to pay the check when Andre was there, and how mad Andre got, and they ended up just putting him on top of a car or something. And we animated it on Grantland, and everybody tries to imitate Andre when they tell the stories.
Yeah.
He told me, no, boss, you don't do that. Hopefully Lee Majors will want to be involved in this.
Can you just get Andrew Luck to come on to do the Andre voice?
The Andre the Giant as Andrew Luck. All right, so that's coming. We don't have a release date or anything, but we're going to be working on this for next year, and couldn't be more excited about this. This took a lot of time and energy, and this is a really important and special person, I think, for Vince and for his daughter. I think for his daughter, it was somebody that she just loved as a kid, and it was just her favorite wrestler there. And I just think they've been very, very protective about this story, because they know this is it. This is the best from a footage, stories, everything standpoint. And the fact that he was there really with Vince Jr. from day one.
Yeah.
And initially he's an announcer and he's just selling this guy, and then he becomes his boss.
Yeah, I mean, you were talking about the YouTube era at the beginning and how that changed the way we look at Andre. Like I could not be more excited to see what kind of footage that you get your hands on that I've never seen.
Quickly, let's talk about WrestleMania's coming up. How many weeks away are we? Like 6, 7?
4 or 5, something like that. It's the very end of March, so whatever that is.
So 6 weeks. So Bray Wyatt won the title last night.
He did.
John Cena won the title 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. Then Bray Wyatt won it. So explain to me what are the matches they're setting up here?
It's looking like
Undertaker Cena is now going to happen.
No. Is that a rumor you've heard? That was the rumor for a long time.
I'm guessing.
No, the latest rumor that I heard was that they're actually going to do Cena and Nikki Bella versus The Miz and Maurice, which is an interesting look for interesting role for John Cena at WrestleMania. But that's a way to get The Miz, who deserves a big WrestleMania spot this year, and
Miz really like the surprise star of the year, right? It seemed like his career was on the downward trajectory and now has reinvented himself.
And the part that's a little bit off our radar is that Nikki Bella and Maurice are both stars on the two reality shows that are a huge part of the WWE universe right now. It does. And when I said this on the Masked Man show last week, they'll figure out a way to have The Miz and John Cena work a really good 12 or 15 minute match within the context of this match. Like it'll be one that we're pleasantly surprised by the next day. That's my guess if they do it.
Cena Styles at Royal Rumble was, I thought, and it seems like a lot of people felt this way who know way more about this stuff than I do, but one of the best matches of Cena's career. And we're now in like year 15. Like there's a little bit of like a Tim Duncan kind of career that he's having as a wrestler now.
Yeah, I mean, you got to give him a lot of. I mean, that's an interesting way to look at it. I don't think I would go young Tim Duncan with I wouldn't parallel young Tim Duncan with young John Cena, but I mean the way that he's reinvented himself as from a real wrestling nerd point of view, as a guy that you always want to see wrestle. When he's my friends and I are just imagining all the Cena matches that are left that we haven't seen yet. And then the rematches. This is AJ. This is the third time he wrestled AJ Styles one-on-one on a big stage, and this was the best match of his career. It was unbelievable.
So you wouldn't say Cena, Tim Duncan?
Well, I think the longevity is really there, but I think that
You don't think he's had you don't think he's like in the top 7 or 8 all time at this point?
I think the longevity is there and the skill late in his career is there. I just think that Tim Duncan was the best player in the league by any metric. For his,
So you don't think Cena was ever the best?
I think he was the most. I think he got wrestler. Once he got his big push. I think you couldn't deny he's a star. It kind of goes back to the Hogan bit I was talking about earlier. That he's undeniably a major wrestler from that point forward. But I don't think he was one of the best wrestlers in the business at that point.
I remember I got an email 2 years ago, and this was after I think the Clippers beat the Spurs in 2015. It was right before I left Grayland. And somebody sent an email about how Duncan and the Spurs had this ability to put other teams over that was very wrestling-like. Where it's like the Suns were trying to get past the Spurs. The Dirk and the Mavs are trying to get by them. And then you go LeBron's trying to get by them. And then you have the Clippers, and you have OKC, and you have all these teams that once they pass the Duncan Spurs kind of hurdle, that's when they were legitimized. And I think Cena's been that guy in the WWE now for 8 years?
I mean, yeah, that's true. When back at Grantland, I wrote a piece that compared a bunch of NBA players to pro wrestlers. It was a giant piece, and the centerpiece of it was John Cena is LeBron. And I think that in a certain way that still holds up because when LeBron was in his first run with the Cavs, there was something missing, right? And it took him teaming up with Wade and Bosch in Miami, and that was sort of like Cena. If you want to make the parallel, that's Cena finding CM Punk and finding these guys, Daniel Bryan, guys that he could actually compare himself to and achieve greatness by competing alongside them.
Yeah, and in a lot of their cases, passing through that Cena thing was the thing that really pushed them and gave them the heat.
The most important thing he did during that, the CM Punk, Daniel Bryan, and even to this day with Kevin Owens and all the guys that he's wrestled, he's wrestling during the U.S. Open Challenge. His most important aspect is that he makes the guys you care about look important by standing next to him. I mean,
sells the shit out of them.
Yeah,
which is funny because that's a great sports TV skill too. I always thought Kornheiser was. I've said this before, but Kornheiser was like Cena. If you're doing TV with Kornheiser, he's selling the shit out of you, and you're gonna feel like you did better than you did. But I think Cena's career, I really felt like it should have been done by now, and it seems like he's about as relevant as he's been, which is why I was surprised by the WrestleMania. What do you think the main event is?
I think that it's going to be, Bray Wyatt versus Randy Orton. Their friendship finally, or their allegiance finally kind of comes to a head in this match where they.
You think anyone cares about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think Randy Orton is always going to be an underrated giant star. The reaction that he gets from most live crowds is kind of hard to wrap your mind around.
I wonder how much the RKO gif and that whole run that move
big.
had. I'm sure that helped him.
It's big.
Even that was my son's one of his favorite pieces of internet content ever.
Yeah. And I love Bray Wyatt. I think it'll be interesting to see how they go. But Bray is one of my favorite wrestlers. I just don't get to see him wrestle that much. I'm sure he's wrestling house shows and stuff, but I don't. He's just not. He doesn't have that many
Seems like a weird time to push him.
Yeah, I mean,
wasn't a ton of setup for it. It seemed like they were phasing him out.
The Orton Wyatt storyline though was great. It's been told really well over a long period of time, and when you look back at it, I mean that's what so much of pro wrestling is. I always joke that it doesn't matter what it looks like on Raw as long as it looks good on the video package on the next episode of Raw, and it's just the way they tell the stories. You can't really wrap your mind around them until they're told almost, Right. So it's whatever. But the other side is more interesting. Okay. Well, Undertaker is still the wild card. But the other side of it is they've already announced Brock Lesnar versus Goldberg for WrestleMania. But at Fastlane in a couple of weeks, Goldberg is fighting Kevin Owens for the Universal title, which is the big Raw belt. Oh. So the rumors as it stands now is that Goldberg is going to take the title, and Goldberg versus Lesnar is going to be is going to be the main event for all the marbles at WrestleMania, which is a really weird decision to make considering the last time they fought at WrestleMania, they got booed out of the stadium for being, for both being about to leave. And for all we know, they're both about to leave now. I mean, I don't think they're going to get booed out of the stadium. People love these guys. They've earned our love and respect. But, whether or not it's like Andre the Giant, Brock Lesnar and Goldberg doesn't need a title,
Goldberg, to me, is Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, Deal or No Deal, where it's fun. But then the network's like, this is great. Let's do these every night. And then it burns out in 3 weeks. And Goldberg, there's just not a lot to work with. It's great. The chant's good. The entrance is good. It's not like he's a good wrestler.
Yeah.
And there's just not a lot of ways to go with it. I would guess that it's better to use him like they did with Lesnar, where it's like you're just kind of parceling him out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the difference with Lesnar is that potentially is that Goldberg is, a little bit more interested in working a good match all the time. I mean, who knows? Lesnar was a little bit like Andre, and that like his mood dictated how good the match was going to be.
They got their revenge on him by just having him get crushed for three straight months.
Someday there's going to be an insider podcast in like a decade that's really going to be interesting about all that stuff.
They must have just been worn out by, to me, the weirdest thing I've seen in wrestling in the past couple years was him just knocking Orton unconscious, basically.
Yeah.
And
like legitimately beating him up.
And it was like, was that in the plans? Did he just miss with an elbow? Because watching it live, I'm like, it just felt real. It didn't feel like there was any sort of faking, hiding. No.
Yeah. This is when you, I think I wrote vaguely about this years ago, but like when you put your title on Brock Lesnar, as they did several years ago, like you're making a really specific, it's like you're, in case of emergency, break glass. It is a very specific decision to put your belt on the conquering monster because there's no one else that has the level of hype, and you just have to do it despite not really trusting the guy. I mean, it's not like he hasn't been trustworthy, but he's not there he's not there day in and day out. It was a very specific move, and, it's a ballsy move, and in some ways it really worked for him. He brings an air of legitimacy that he can make anybody look good if he wants to, just like Andre.
But yeah, you can lose that legitimacy if you have him get 3 to 4 guys. Like
you can lose that legitimacy when he gets beaten 20 seconds by a 50-year-old man. Right. I mean, it's not like I love Goldberg. I've really enjoyed having him back, but it's the opposite end of the booking spectrum.
I think the biggest mistake they've made in the last year is just how many times Kevin Owens has lost. Meltzer had like the win-loss records at the end of 2016.
Yeah.
And Kevin Owens was like 62 and 135.
Well, he's counting house shows then.
I know. He counts everything.
Yeah. I mean, a heel champ at in a non-title match in Poughkeepsie or something, like that's not a bad place for him to lose if you want to send the crowd home happy. That's always the way they make those decisions. But I agree with you. Bray Wyatt also was on a crazy losing streak in pay-per-views for the longest time. And the logic is always he doesn't need to win. He's the sort of like new Undertaker, the mystical guy. But it's like he does need to win. Everybody needs to win.
Let him win every once in a while.
I mean, listen, Kevin Owens isn't going to his career won't be over if he loses to Goldberg. And he might be the best guy to get a good match out of Goldberg too. I mean, he was wrestling on the indies for so long, and people remember his matches with El Generico and like the best, like these really high octane, great wrestling matches. But man, if you work the indies long enough, you've wrestled your fair share of like 50-year-old former stars who can't really move around that much, Well,
so AJ Styles has been the best free agent acquisition they've had in a long time.
He's been the best wrestler, and
what a year.
Yeah.
Every match he wrestles is just super entertaining. My son loves him. He's
so
I think
great.
He's going to break his neck trying to do the 450 flip, but that's fine. You got to live and you got to learn. But
that's terrible.
No, but AJ Styles, he's the first guy that's been WWE in a while where I'm just with my son like, Ben, don't do that.
Yeah.
Do not try that one. That's too crazy. Right? The Hardy Boys were like that way back then, but Ben wasn't around.
Sure.
Remember Jeff and Matt Hardy reached a point where it was like, all right, nobody else do this.
Yeah. It's like
these two guys, please.
They were finding taller ladders for them to jump off of. They were just like
making 28-foot ladders.
Yeah, that was I can't imagine trying to raise a kid during the Hardy Boys era. I mean, AJ Styles is at least you can point at AJ Styles and be like, he's the greatest athlete in the world and he can do these things, so don't try it, And
he's tiny.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's not tiny.
Him, he's like tiny for what you think he would be. Like I'm going to say he was like 5'10".
Probably, yeah.
When I met him last year at the thing, and you assume all these guys are going to be like, our size or bigger.
Yeah. Oh, I always say that if an angel had come down from heaven when I was like, in 6th grade and said like, you're going to be tall enough to be a major wrestler, I probably would have tried. But it never occurred to me that like 6'1" was big enough to be a wrestler. I thought they were all 6'8". I thought
because they lie about their height.
Sure, that's a problem.
Hulk Hogan was 7 feet tall or whatever. Like 6'4". So AJ Styles is wrestling who? You think?
The rumor right now is Shane McMahon. which is not a great use of AJ, but also but you got to factor in that in Vince McMahon's mind, that's like making him the greatest champion of all time. You get the match with Shane. You know, that's a big compliment.
Who would have been, just from a pure wrestling standpoint, who would have been the best AJ Styles match?
I mean, a lot of people would say put him up against John Cena again. I mean, part of it's we're constricted by this brand split where there's only the guys on SmackDown. I mean, I think that AJ versus Undertaker would be one of the really most interesting ways to use the Undertaker, although you always want to see Undertaker against a quote-unquote young guy, and AJ is new to WWE, but not a young guy.
He looked pretty banged up, the Undertaker, at the Rumble.
He looked the first time where like I wasn't trying to defend him when people around me were making old jokes. You know, like he didn't
looked
look
late
great.
80s Andre-ish.
Yeah, and apparently he didn't feel great after the match. I think that's what Meltzer said. So he's got. I mean, part of the difficulty with the Undertaker is that you got to find somebody who can literally carry him through a match. You know, if he needs to be just carried from one end of the ring to the other, there's not a long list of wrestlers who can do that.
What was his best? You think Michaels? The Michaels one from like 5 years ago?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I enjoy the Triple H. I'm an irrational Triple H.
You like Triple H more than I do.
I like Triple H more than
most
people.
More off the out of the ring.
But Michaels is definitely the answer there. Yeah.
I guess Triple H had some good ones. All right. So the Masked Man Wrestling Podcast.
The Masked Man Show.
The Masked Man Show.
Every week.
On Channel 33.
Yeah.
Heavy rumors that we might spin this off onto its own podcast.
Well, I'm hearing it here first. So
heavy rumors. No, I read
Tate's going to be really glad because whenever people ask me about it, I just direct them to him on Twitter. So
all right. So I might make a cameo on your podcast.
You got to come on for WrestleMania.
Once they have the matchups.
Yeah.
There's gambling for this.
There's someone told me there's a new site that's just like wrestling bets.
This is crazy. The wrestling renaissance
at the Royal Rumble though, the odds went from like everybody, you know, what you'd expect to like Randy Orton is heavily favored the day of, and there was no reason why.
Yeah,
there's like this is crazy. Like you can't take bets on. First of all, it's wrestling. You shouldn't be able to take bets on this stuff.
No.
But what do you think? You think it's like Vince McMahon or like Kevin Dunn is just like, you know what, I'm going to put like 10 grand on that just for fun? Like, how does that happen?
The way it should do it is they should accept WrestleMania, who's going to be in the WrestleMania main event bets and who's going to win should be taken like 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Before, just guess. It's like future bets, basically. Like
that's
betting
an
the NFL title. But when it gets close, it's just I don't know. It's certainly not a bet I would make.
No, I mean, I think when you go into WrestleMania, you get to a point where like you can kind of predict. Well, you can always like I can always predict what's going to happen on Raw the next night better than I can predict the outcome of the pay-per-view.
Yeah.
Because you know where they're going, but there's two different ways. There's at least two ways to get there, right? It doesn't really matter who wins or loses. That said, there's always one big match that they'll just change to spite us. So whatever.
David Shoemaker, a pleasure as always.
Thank you, man. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right, that's it for the pod. Thanks to HBO and WWE. So happy to announce the Andre the Giant documentary today. Thanks to SeatGeek, our presenting sponsor since 1963. Thanks to MeUndies. Go to MeUndies.com/BS right now for 20% off your first order. Thanks to Harry's. Go to Harry's.com/BS right now and redeem your free trial set. Thanks to Teed Up on Ringer University. And thanks to Pearl Jam. Go to PearlJam.com right now to find out all the details about PJ25, their 25th anniversary. They're also a very good Twitter follow. I like how they tweet concert performances and stuff like that. It's at Pearl Jam. Check it out. And thanks to Tom Brady. It's been a week since we won the Super Bowl. I still love you. Go Pats. Play us out, Eddie.